Hello, now we are live for today's session. Nice to be with you on Instagram again. This is in continuation of my 55th birthday. Of course, we had a session that started yesterday with Engineer Abiodun Fijabi. He was really just telling us about life and how to win in life regardless of anything you have gone through. So basically this we're going to be having a 10-day seminar, so to say, where we're going to be having a speaker talk to us each of those days, generally about life, through it all, the things they also have gone through in life, and how they were able to win. And just to encourage every one of us to know that no matter what you are going through in life presently, you are not the only one. Other people also are going through, if things that are not even worse than what you are going through. By God's grace and mercy, I had gone through a lot of things also in life, and by His grace, I am who I am today. And it's just an encouragement for every one of us also to know that no matter what, God is taking you somewhere, and you're going to become who He wants you to become in life. So another thing that I'm doing in commemoration of my 55th birthday is that I've rolled out 55,000 free copies of my book. Yes, 55,000 free copies of the e-copy of Through It All. So you can go to my website, www.tia.ng. Sorry, www.tia.com.ng/free download, and you'll be able to get a copy, your own copy of Through It All. Is a gift for every one of us. So today we are having a very special guest with us. It's somebody that I've heard the story also. It to have gone through it all before, and to the glory of God, in the process of going through all the woes of this world, he ended up a medical doctor. He's also a lawyer, and he's doing very well. He's going to be telling us more today, much more about anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts or suicidal tendencies. What causes these things? Why do people get to this point? How do we get out of it? So Dr. Adegboyega Ogunwale is going to be sharing with us. So I'm not going to talk for so long. I'm just going to bring him live now so that we can start the session. I know others will be joining us along the line. Yes, 55,000 copies of my book. It's not because I felt like just rolling it out. Many have found encouragement through the book. Many have found maybe something that have helped them to straighten their purpose and course in life. And I feel many other people need to also encounter the book and find courage, find hope, find comfort, and find grace, find faith, find boldness to move on in life despite all odds. All right, so thank you very much. I'm going to be bringing in Dr. Ogunwale now. And then without any serious ado again, we're going to roll on today. All right, thank you all for joining us. Dr. Ogunwale, nice to see your face, sir.
Yes, nice to be on the program.
Nice to really have you here. How are you, sir?
I'm very fine. And yourself?
I'm really good.
It's really a big honor having you here. I know you're a very busy man, so accepting to talk to us today, to me, I'm not taking it for granted. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to feature on the program. So I think that sense of privilege is mutual. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, you're going to be taking us through a presentation this afternoon on issue of depression and suicidal thoughts or tendencies, which is your field. But before you go into that, I want you to introduce us, you to us. Have you ever gone through any trouble in life, or everything just got so smooth from childhood till now, and then you are not just a medical doctor, and I think we should just be like you? How has it been?
Well,
how has it been from childhood?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to share my story and then to talk a bit about depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that when you introduced me as a doctor and a lawyer. Don't like the MBA, catch you. Well, I have a law degree. I have a law degree, but I'm not a qualified lawyer. I didn't study law as my first degree, and I have not been to law school. So what I've got is a Master of Laws degree.
All right. We don't know the difference.
It's all right. It's all right. So to be honest, I think it's very easy to look at a person's current situation in life and think that that person had always been like that. So when you say I should talk about my own story to see if it's all been rosy all through, well, I think I'll start with that that idiom that people use. They say that life is not a bed of roses. Well, I think I disagree. I think life is a bed of roses because actually roses have thorns. So there are thorns. Yes. So I will say that. So for me, I think my childhood, they do. Roses have thorns. So in my childhood, I held no promise as a very young child. I held no promise. I was the last boy of a set of 3 boys, and my mom was expecting a girl. My dad did not want another child. He wanted a small family, and my mom wanted a girl. But I came along. I was neither a girl nor certainly somebody they wanted to have. Certainly not a boy. They already had 2. So somehow I felt that played a role in the way, my parents paid attention to me. They did not dislike me. They showed me love, but I did not have the kind of special attention that my younger sister, because we eventually had a girl, my younger sister definitely had. I didn't have that. And the first 2 boys were just enjoying their own lives. Now, the other problem was I came across as a very slow child. So the first 2 boys were smart, and I wasn't. I was slow. So in fact, I think I was the latest to start primary school, nursery school. So everybody else probably went to nursery school at about age 3 or so. I couldn't join nursery school at that age. I was so slow. Eventually, I went for an interview. Probably I was around 4. I can't remember now, but later than the rest. So when I went for the first interview, my mom came to pick me up after the interview. Then while we were in the car, she asked me how the interview went. Well, I told her I did not even answer any questions. I didn't bother myself with answering any questions. So, of course, that was clear. The outcome was already decided. So I had to come back the following year. And that delay, I still repeated nursery 1. So I was a slow coach by whatever standard. And then when I got to nursery 1, I tried to manage, but that year I was rough, so I had to repeat. But somehow, God stepped into my life in nursery 2. So nursery 2, I began to pick up. And from that point on, I never looked back. God had turned my life into a miracle. So for me, my beginning was rough. my beginning, was not what many people would have thought that it was. In fact, an uncle of mine who lived in Spain at the time, when he visited Nigeria, he told another uncle.
The network should do us good today. Wow. We just lost the connection of Dr. Ogunwale. He was telling us how it was so rough for him from childhood, how he referred to himself as a slow coach. That means that he actually picked up so slowly academically and in some other areas. I know he's going to join us back shortly. But before he does, I want to remind us you can also download your own copy of Treatall from my website, tia.com.ng/free-download. You can download your own free copy of Treatall from there. And let me get your feedback or reaction after you have read the book. You can send it to my WhatsApp. WhatsApp or Instagram or even Facebook. We'll wait for Dr. Ogunwale to join us back. We'll wait for him to join us back. One key thing I actually want us, I'm not a medical doctor, but I know that there's a lot of apprehension, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of the present situation going on out there. Many have lost their jobs. Companies are shutting down. I don't know, maybe it's because husbands and wives had never stayed together for this long during the lockdown, and suddenly they have discovered some not so palatable things about themselves. Marriages are affected. Things are just going, the wrong side, and there's a lot of hopelessness in the air. There's a lot of anxiety. I want to tell you that, number one, it's not going to always be like this. And then number two, I want you to know that in the midst of crisis, in the midst of trouble, opportunities are not always far. The things that's going to change the situations, they are not always far from us. So it's not for you to give up. It's not for you to throw caution to the air. I know some people have even gone to the very, very extreme of taking their lives, committing suicide. I want you to understand that, number one, there's nothing that is happening now that is not common to man. There's nothing that we are experiencing presently or going through presently that is not common to human beings. Others have gone through it, and we've had stories of people that lost everything, and then at the end of the day, they gained something much more than they have lost. I am one of those people. That's why I wrote through it all. So no matter what you are going through now, it's not the end of your story. There is a tomorrow. There is a future for you. And don't just give up now. Don't throw in the towel. Don't go to the extreme of losing your life or killing yourself. I read of a guy recently, just last week, that was going to plunge himself into the lagoon just because he was owing a debt of 500,000. I want you to know that 500,000, that guy wanted to kill himself because of that. is what some people blow, even in one night, at one sitting, maybe in clubs or in hotels. So it's not worth you killing yourself for. We're going to talk more about that. Dr. Ogunwale has joined us, so I'm just going to bring him back live right away. All right. All right. Dr. Ogunwale, nice to have you back.
I don't know what happened. Maybe my network.
Yes, it was the network.
Yeah.
But it's nice that you are back.
Yes, indeed.
All right.
Yeah.
So maybe you just conclude on your own tweet or story, and then we go into the presentation.
Yeah, so, I was saying in childhood it was rough academically. But when God stepped into it, I moved ahead and I became quite, confident in my studies. I was coming first in class. I was the guy winning all the prizes during prize giving day. Nobody could explain what happened, but God had changed my story. Now, and that went on. That went on till I wanted to go into secondary school. And all of a sudden, I saw that my performance was a bit challenged again, getting into secondary school. My dad wanted me to go to Federal Government College, but somehow I didn't just quite hit the cutoff mark. Eventually, I went to Olivet Baptist High School, Oyo, which we call Olivet Heights. But that was the plan of God for my life. Now, I didn't know. So through that adversity, God redirected my focus in life. And up until that time, I had not found faith. Yeah, I just grew up working very hard, facing my studies. It was at Olivet that I found faith. Now, of all the secular groups that I've seen, one of them that has been so remarkable in their own creed is the Junior Chambers International. The creed starts by saying, we believe that faith in God gives meaning and purpose to human life. And I said, that's amazing. That was how I began to gain a sense of purpose in my life. Do you know that before I got into secondary school, because I had no faith per se, I went to church, I went to the mosque, and I came from a multi-religious background. So there was a day that my mom punished us in a corporal way. She beat us. And I felt so angry and displeased that I actually contemplated suicide. I wanted to ingest a pesticide. I won't mention the name in those days. I'm sure you will know the name. Yeah. But thank God for my brother, my immediate elder brother, with whom I was going to commit the suicide. He just simply told me, look, mommy can get a bit stiff and, difficult sometimes, but it's not the end of life. So today I'll be talking about people talking with people as being a way out of suicide. Just merely talking with the right person can be the way out. So I didn't commit suicide that day. So I'm talking to you today as someone who has entertained suicidal thoughts before himself. Not to talk of the challenges of medical school when I saw my peers dropping out and things were not so rosy sometimes either. There were times that were difficult, but ultimately I went through medical school and then I graduated and became a doctor. Can I tell you about how while I was in medical school, I got engaged to a pretty lady, a Christian sister who I thought I was going to get married to. But for no reason, she was just not interested in getting married to me after saying yes. I'd invested my life. I'd invested my reputation. I was a Christian fellowship leader. I was a leader among students. I was somebody people looked up to. And here was I. I couldn't even explain why a girl was leaving me. Well, she left me because we had to discuss it. And she said she thought she loved me, but she did not think it was enough to marry me. And here was I, surrounded by the prettiest ladies around. I was a tutorial coordinator. I was a tutorial coordinator in University of Ilorin. I was well known. Pretty ladies were around me. I could have had any one of them as my wife to be, but I felt, oh no, this was the person I thought God wanted me to marry. And the disappointment was great. We had gotten so involved with family. Both families were already so close. I had met each other. It was a gross disappointment. But today, I will tell you that God had a different plan where I'm happily married today. She's happily married herself. She's got 3 children. I've got 3 children. And we've both moved on with our lives. So I'll tell you, need I tell you about the fact that I'm a psychiatrist today, but I failed my first entrance exam into psychiatry. I did. And when I passed it, I was one of the earliest in my set to become appointed as a consultant in any field, one of the earliest. So I'll say that life is filled with challenges. Life is filled with troubles. But when we go through adversity, adversity is like gold passing through fire. It would only make us shine brighter and remove the impurities in us. So let me try to round up my story.
All right.
After I'd done all of that, I became a doctor. I became a consultant. The first year of being appointed a consultant, I had a cardiac problem. First year. So I told myself this was my sun setting at dawn. It was not even setting at noon. You know, so I had a cardiac problem. I could not go to work. I couldn't even get out of bed. But I stayed in faith and trusted God to heal me. And I listened to my doctors, followed advice, took medication that was necessary. And this is how many years down the line, I'm strong, I'm hale and hearty. God is glorified. Okay, so for me, some people will say, if I have a cardiac problem, I'm not going to wait until it gives me a stroke. I'm going to end it all. And then that was in 2011. By 2013, when I thought life was getting better, I developed tuberculosis. I couldn't even explain where it came from. So you have a cardiac problem, you have tuberculosis. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. But thank God, God took me through that. By 2014, thereabout, I noticed that there was a swelling in my neck. So by 2017, I was already having surgery for a salivary tumor. Now, but it was not a cancer. Thank God for that. But what I'm saying is, life is more than the roses. It's also about the thorns. But we can go through both as God helps us. So, I mean, I can't just continue to tell you all the woes, but it's beautiful. Life is beautiful. Life is good. And we thank God for that.
Feeling and experiencing lots of hardship is just part of life.
It is.
And those tests are what gives us testimonies. Depression and suicidal thoughts. So we'll be taking notes.
Yes. Well, I guess so.
All right, go ahead, sir.
All right, that will be my story. Do you want me to share any more? I need to go to my talk.
I know you have a lot. Maybe we should go into your stories today and then go into your thoughts. Talk another time. I think you should go into the talk. If we have time, then we go back to the story.
Lovely, lovely. So today, very briefly, I'll be talking about the topic you've given this, your birthday kind of delivery to the public, conversations about anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts. So the first thing I think we should understand is when we talk about depression, suicidal thoughts, and anxiety, we're actually talking about the mental health arena. So we must first understand what mental health is. The World Health Organization has defined mental health as a state of well-being in which an individual can do four things, four critical things. One, that individual can realize or achieve his potential in life. Number two, that individual can cope with the normal stresses of life. And I'll talk about that briefly. And that individual can work productively and fruitfully. And finally, that individual is able to make contribution to his or her own community. Four things. That is mental health. It is one, your ability or capacity to achieve your potential. Number two is to be able to deal with the normal stresses of life. Number three is to be able to, contribute to your community. And number four is to work fruitfully and productively. So I like to explain it this way. If you have someone who has what people term mental retardation, we don't call it that anymore. We call it learning disability. So that person would probably have become a professor, but because he cannot learn, he will probably become someone who couldn't even go to school. So that is a mental health problem. Now, somebody who cannot deal with ordinary traffic holdup, once he's in the traffic holdup, he's sweating, he feels like jumping out of his car, it looks like the whole world is collapsing around him. That sort of person cannot cope with the normal stresses of life. I mean, I was talking about failing the entrance exam. I failed the exam and I took the exam the next 6 months. I did. I could have said, no, this is not for me. Since I failed it, I will never pass it. No, it was a difficult exam. But I took it the second time round. By God's grace, I passed it. That's a normal stress of life. Now, so if somebody told us that the moment you failed an exam, you could never pass it again, that person has a catastrophic view of life. That's not being able to deal with the normal stresses of life. Okay? So sometimes I would tell someone, it's part of the normal stress of life. If you don't have power in your house, I mean, alternative power, if you are trying to iron your clothes and NEPA takes away the power, and you have ironed the front part of the shirt, then make sure you wear a jacket. At least the front part will be crease-free. The rest part of it will be hidden by the jacket. But somebody says, I can't go out today. This is the end of my life because I couldn't get my shirt ironed. Come off it, brother. Just move on. There's nothing else you can do. It's your reality before you. Okay, so, and then you look at being able to work productively and fruitfully. So if you've seen someone who is mentally ill by the roadside before, conducting traffic, you will see that the fellow is working very hard, but there's no productivity. There is no fruitfulness out of it. That is a feature of a mental illness. So if you know someone who works so hard, but there is nothing to show for it, I tell you that that person has a mental problem lurking somewhere, hiding somewhere. It is a feature. It's not until someone starts hearing voices or seeing things that other people cannot see that you say he's got a mental illness. If one of these 4 domains is demonstrably affected, that person, until otherwise proven, has a mental health problem hiding somewhere. And finally, can you contribute to your community? So if you do everything, but you are all on your own, having no interaction with your community around you, no matter how successful you might be, or an achiever you might claim to be, there is something wrong with your mental health in not being able to contribute at all to your community. So that's the way to look at mental health. So do we have mental health problems in Nigeria? Because I'm going to focus on Nigeria today. I haven't got much time to look at all over the world. And I'll be looking at depression and anxiety basically. So do we have problems with depression and anxiety and some other mental health problems in Nigeria? Yes. Studies that have been done in the last 15 years have made that very clear. So I would tell you that in the last 1 year, at least 1 out of 100 Nigerians would have had a major depressive episode. Now, what that means is that 1 million Nigerians, okay? About 2 million, 1 out of 100. So about 2 million, if we have a rough estimate of 200 million Nigerians, about 2 million Nigerians in the last year alone have had a major depressive episode. So when you hear people committing suicide, young girl, elderly man, middle-aged guy jumping into the lagoon, some of them have active episodes of depression. And if you look at the lifetime, if we had 100 of us on this platform right now, at least 3 out of the 100 of us have had a major depressive illness in their lifetime. Meaning 6 million Nigerians would have had depression before. God help you if any one of them chose to commit suicide at that time. So let's move on to anxiety. Anxiety is like that as well. So if we look at any anxiety disorder, at least 5, almost 6 out of every 100 have had, anxiety before. That's about 10 million. Yeah, 10 to 12 million Nigerians in their lifetime have had it. And then in the last year, about 4 in 100. So that's about 8 million Nigerians having had anxiety disorder, any type, in the last year. Now, in a state of anxiety, life is difficult to live. And at such a time, you might consider trying to harm yourself or do something really terrible. So briefly, what are anxiety disorders? We've talked about them generally now, how they might occur in our environment. What are anxiety disorders? Anxiety disorders are related conditions, but there are many types of them. So there are those that have to do with being anxious about everyday things. You're anxious about everything. That's called generalized anxiety disorder. So there are those that have to do with being afraid of a specific thing, an object or a living thing. So if you're afraid of animals, of injections, of blood, of heights, of enclosed spaces, of crowded places, you can have different forms of phobias. That's what we call them, phobias. They are forms of anxiety disorders. Okay. So you could also have social phobia, not just of objects and living things. You could be afraid of being in a place where people will criticize you or scrutinize you. Like I'm making a presentation now. If I had social phobia by now, I'll be sweaty. I will be in a state of panic. All right. So these are the different types of anxiety disorders that people might have. And the common thread that runs through all of them is that there's excessive fear or worry. I won't go into the physiology of fear as different from worry. There are different areas of the brain that mediate the two, but they are very similar. Now, what are the emotional symptoms that you see in anxiety? Because you have both emotional symptoms and physical symptoms. That is symptoms you will feel in your body. What are the emotional symptoms? You have a feeling of dread or apprehension. You are unable to relax. You feel tense. You are jumpy. Sometimes you anticipate the worst and you are thinking that it's going to be really terrible tomorrow. That may be what you'll find. Now, what about the physical symptoms, the symptoms in your body that you will feel? Your mouth may be dry. Your heart will be pounding. Like people say in Yoruba language, ayemaja, as if your heart is cutting, okay? And then you could have shortness of breath, muscles in your face or in other parts of your body may be twitching. As I'm saying all of these things, I'm sure many people on the platform remember their own states of anxiety. You know, you could have stomach upset. I don't know if you have been on your way to an interview before and you got stuck in traffic. You know, you feel like going to the toilet immediately. It's just that my life is ruined today. You know, but your life isn't ruined. You're just not going to meet the timing for the interview. And that is not the end of life. So, yeah, there can be frequent urination or can have diarrhea, headaches, fatigue in the body, and then being unable to sleep. You know, these are some of the physical symptoms. And then let's quickly move on to depression. What do you see in depression? Generally, depression is what you call a mood disorder. So the first thing that people tend to notice, or sometimes might not be the first, one of the key things that we notice is that they have problems with their mood. They are just sad for no reason. And it would have been on for about 2 weeks. So there will be low mood, the person is down, unable to sleep well, or sleeping too much, unable to eat well, or eating too much. That the person can even think that all I'm getting is comfort from food. Like food is comforting me. My life is... Okay, can I go on?
Go on, sir.
Yes. Then the person might have a difficulty with concentration. So the person, you are speaking to the fellow, and the fellow is saying, were you talking to me? What did you just say? Sorry, I skipped that. I missed that. The person might even put clothes out on the line and then forget that he even washed that day and then the clothes are soaked in the rain. Poor concentration. There's lack of energy. The person continuously has no energy to do things. And even if the energy is there, has no interest. And even if the interest is there and the energy is there, the person lacks pleasure from doing those things. So the person feels hopeless, and that is where depression enters into suicidality. So the person then feels hopeless. Life has no meaning, and it looks like I can't go on. Now, unusually, in younger people, you may not find that. You might find it, all these symptoms, you might not. What else could you find in younger people? They could be unduly irritable. So the next time you are reprimanding your daughter or your son because he's just irritable, he's angry with everybody, it could be a feature of depression. Sit him down, show love and comfort him, encourage him, and just generally help him to be able to confide in you. Sometimes you won't find anger and irritability. You might just find social withdrawal. They will just withdraw with adolescents. And then you are saying, why aren't you coming down to eat your food? Why aren't you coming down to sit in the sitting room with the other members of the family? Don't judge that child. Inquire, examine, interrogate with love. Find out what's going on. You know, I guess one of the questions we hardly ask in very, very cultural societies like ours, where we think the adult knows best or the father knows better, is that we never ask the question why. That was my deliverance in academics. I visited my pediatrics lecturer years ago, and while we were in the sitting room, he told us this, that the most important question that helped him to learn was to ask the question why. So many people would have been saved from suicide if somebody had bothered to ask them why. So why aren't you coming to work? Why aren't you relating with other members of the family? But what do? We already know why. Yeah, he's not coming to work because he's lazy. He just wants to earn a salary and not work. Yeah, it doesn't come down because he's a stubborn boy. That's what I was like that at his age, very stubborn. But before you become a recalcitrant, I will break you. Well, if you eventually succeed in breaking it, the guy will commit suicide right under the nose of the parent. And then it's a very, very traumatic event. So let's ask the question why? From adults, from children, from adolescents. Now, there is a kind of depression that will not typically follow the low mood, loss of interest and all of that, which we call the atypical one. It hides itself. I once treated a student like that. He dropped out of school. I forgot to mention that. Sometimes with adolescents, all you will see is that they will drop in their academic performance. So there will be a serious drop. And you can't explain why. So before you say he has joined a bad peer group, which is not impossible, ask the question why. Shola, what's going on? Today, can you tell me why this is so? Tell me more about what happened. I mean, I remembered years ago in secondary school when I joined a few of my friends to write a letter to the school. And because of that, I was not made the senior prefect. That's what I think. I got a feedback that was why I was not made a senior prefect. You know, I tell you, the fact is, my dad never condemned me when he heard about it. He simply asked me a question, Boyega, what happened? And when I told him what happened, my father simply said to me, never forget this. Can you still hear me, sir?
I can hear you. You can go ahead.
My father told me, and I never quite forgot it. He said, Boyega, in life, when people lose their heads, remember to keep yours. I never forgot it. So instead of judging me, he asked the question why, and he knew exactly what my problem was and offered me a solution. So for the atypical type of depression, the person can overeat instead of not eating enough. The person can gain weight instead of losing weight. The person can oversleep instead of not being able to sleep. But the person then generally will feel heavy. It's as if you are so tired you cannot move, your limbs are heavy, and then you will also be very anxious. Now, how do we link depression and suicide? So when a person is depressed, in the work of Aaron Beck did some work. He looked at what happens to the thinking of somebody who is depressed, and he called them the cognitive triad in depression. That is three things you will find in depression. Number one is helplessness. The person feels helpless. That is a negative view of yourself. The second thing is hopelessness, a negative view of the future. And then the last one is worthlessness. The helplessness is a negative view of the world. That is, the world cannot help me. Worthlessness is a negative view of self. I'm worth nothing. So I go by it again. Helplessness is a negative view of the world. I have no help around. Everything is over. worthlessness, a negative view of self. I'm worth nothing. The world wouldn't even miss me if I took my leave. And then a sense of hopelessness, a negative view of the future. So the future is bleak. The world around the person is bleak. The world inside the person is bleak. That is a recipe for suicide. Now, in the research that has been done in Nigeria, we now know that those who commit suicide, or who attempt suicide rather, that a great percentage of them actually have mental health problems. And what has the research shown us? The research has shown us, not just in Nigeria, taking research, the body of research together, roughly. The research has shown us that if a person is depressed and is not treated, 15 out of hundreds of such people will commit suicide. 15% will commit suicide if they are not treated.
Thanks.
Yes. Now, if a person has another mental disorder called schizophrenia, 10 to 40% of them will attempt suicide. About 40% of them will attempt, and 10% will complete it, will commit suicide. And the research has also shown that 90% of those who attempt suicide actually have a mental health problem. And out of that total, almost 6 out of 10 will have depression. So if you take 100 people who have attempted suicide, about 60% of them will have or actually suicide. So what else does the research show us in Nigeria? The research tells us that if a person has had depression in the last 1 year, he is about 8 times more likely to think of suicide than somebody who has not had depression. So that risk is increased 700%. Let me put it that way. 8 times means 700%. If a person had 100% risk of thinking of suicide, if you have depression, that risk is increased 8-fold. Now, if somebody has depression in the last year, he is about 18 times more likely to make a plan. That is over 1,000% increment of risk to make a plan to kill himself. And if the person has had depression in the last 1 year, he's actually 11 times more likely to practically attempt suicide. So can you see that if they arrest someone who has attempted suicide and take him to the police station, it's a wrong direction, and which we do in this country typically. All right, so let's talk about suicide briefly. Suicide is self-inflicted injury with a fatal outcome. So you injure yourself with the expectation that you will die. So when we actually have people who have tried to kill themselves in the hospital, we just don't ask them about what they did. We ask them about what plans they made to ensure that they did not survive. Because that's what will help you to see how serious the attempt is. So there was a patient I once treated who said he had tried to hang himself. He gave us all sorts of scenarios. Thank God for the wife and the children who were at home and made sure he did not kill himself, that he was resolute in his mind that that day he was leaving this world. So while we were treating him, he kept telling us that there was nothing to live for. He was still going to kill himself. But with support and treatment, the gentleman was discharged home alive. What I'm saying is, even if you have had suicidal thoughts, even if you have attempted it before, that still is not the end of your life. It's not your unchangeable destiny. You can find help, you know. So how prevalent is suicide in our own environment? Suicide is about 9.5 in every 100,000 Nigerians. So about 10 in every 100,000. Okay, so from the WHO research, is almost about 19,000 suicides that we would expect in Nigeria annually. It's not just imaginary figures. As a matter of fact, the figures we get in the media, they are what you call the tip of the iceberg. Many more people are dying and being buried without anybody getting to know that they committed suicide than the number we get on the TV screen and police arrests and all of that. So because 9.5 in 100,000 means you are going to have 95, okay, in 1 million. So 95 times 200 million. I mean, you get my point, times 200. That comes to a little over 18,000 annually, okay? And all over the world, there are 800,000 suicides annually, 800,000. So if you say 19,000 from Nigeria, it's not unbelievable, okay? 18,000 in Nigeria, or about 18 to 19,000, and then in the world, 800,000. And I will tell you that it used to be quoted as 1 million. But over the last few years, certain steps have been taken to reduce suicide rates all over the world. And one of the things I'll be mentioning is government has a role to play. Because all over the world, what has happened is that governments have been responsible to lower suicide rates. So it's not just the individual, but the society at large. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in those who are young adults, 15 to 29-year-olds. And we know about 30% of suicides all over the world are due to pesticides. Am I saying something familiar to us?
Yes, sir.
So that's why they banned sniper. Research has shown that if you ban things like sniper, you reduce the rate of suicide by almost 70%. But you have to enforce the ban. So in Nigeria today, if you want to buy something like sniper, I guess people get it to buy still. And it's supposed to be banned. It's a very neurotoxic agent that people should not have around them. Because the less toxic the agent you use, the more likely that if you are discovered, you will live. So that's why things like that should be banned. 30% are due to pesticides. So who are those who have an increased risk of committing suicide? Those who have attempted suicide in the past, older people who have lost their spouses through death or divorce, people with a family history of suicide, so it can run in families. Okay, people with a friend or co-worker who recently committed suicide, because there's what you call the copycat suicide. If you have been feeling low, somebody committed suicide. If you know how the person committed his own, then you carry out your own. Okay, so it's called the copycat suicide or the weather effect. Particularly when it's on the media. On the media, when people start reporting on the media that this person committed suicide, and instead of it to be just this fellow ended his own life, they then tell you he went inside the room, he did this, he did that. That can provoke a rash of suicides. And we say it's part of suicide prevention to ensure responsible media reportage. Okay, so people with a history of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, you can imagine a girl who's been raped by her father repeatedly. She might just think, I can't live with this and I can't get out of it. The way out is to kill myself. People who are unmarried, who are unskilled, who have no employment, no hope for the future, they can actually kill themselves. People with long-term pain, people who have chronic illnesses, who have terminal illnesses. I mean, I was happy to think of that. I was going to ask you, Brother Kola, did you ever contemplate suicide sometime in your life because of your disability?
Well, maybe not for disability, because it happened when I was young. But it was when I had business problem that I felt, and I was in debt, and everybody was running after me, and I felt if I even just die, everybody will go and sit down.
They would, actually. But we wouldn't have through it all in our hands today. We wouldn't have this beautiful season of learning from one another today. So I want to tell our listeners that suicide is no man's unchangeable destiny, regardless of what you are going through. So People who are impulsive may also commit suicide. They're tired of life and they just end their lives. And one thing that tends to contribute to all of this is stigma. So if you can't talk to people because they will judge you, then you're likely to suffer in silence and then act boldly in silence. So what are the early warning signs? I'm looking at our time. Excessive sadness or moodiness, long-lasting sadness that you can't explain, sudden calmness, everything is going rough. All of a sudden, the fellow says it is all right. There's no problem anymore. Wow, you've got to be careful. There is still problem. Why is he so calm suddenly? That might be because he has finally decided, like you were thinking, to just get everybody to sit down and stop chasing him with policemen. Withdrawal. The person was engaging before, just withdrew. Opens the doors only for very well-known people, doesn't even want to see anyone. It might be the preparation for suicide. Changes in appearance or personality. Somebody was very conservative before, now dresses so gaily, and everything looks like every day is like a party. You have to ask, what's going on, brother? Why? The question is why, you know? And then the fellow says, well, Brother Kola, I'm only trying to do the exact opposite of what is going on in me. I'm so down. I feel so worthless. But a man has to find a way to make himself happy. So that's why he's dressing that way. All right? Dangerous or harmful behavior. So the guy likes to go to the club, get drunk, and drive at high speed. Don't just say he's a reckless man at 35. Ask him why. Ask him why. The man will then tell you, I've got a first-class degree in physics, and I've been unemployed for 10 years. Tell me why I shouldn't die from an... And the whole story is ended. And while you are speaking with him, he breaks down in tears. And then you, Mr. Kola Olugbodi, you offer him a job at background check, and the guy doesn't want to die anymore. It's as simple as that. Or you send him to me and I have a chat with him, start him on some medication, and we will have him around for the next 70 years. It's as simple as that. But we bother to ask the question, why? What about recent trauma or life crisis? So it's so traumatic, you would feel like dying, and the person is saying there's no problem at all. Don't worry, I've got it all covered. Get close to that chap. You might be preparing to end it all. What about somebody who has even made preparations? So this person has told you, I bought this, I bought this. And the person would actually carry it out, but you don't know. You believe now that the person has talked about it, you wouldn't do it. No, research has told us that those who talk about it do it. When we see those signs. Can I go on? I think I've lost you, Mr. Olugbodi. Can I go on, sir?
Hello, sir.
Can I go on, sir?
Now we have just like 2 minutes. I think what we are going to do, you can keep talking. Once it rolls, the time runs out, we are going to roll it on maybe for some other 15 minutes, because it's really nice that you conclude what you are saying. People are just hold on. Yours is not going to break. But people on Instagram, please join us again if this video ends. We have just like 2 minutes more. You can go ahead, sir.
So what do you plan to do if we get cut off mid-sentence?
Sir?
What do you plan to do since we have just 2 minutes more?
No, we'll start afresh on another video.
Oh, all right, sir.
Another video, yes, it can roll for 3 minutes, and then I'll start another video. So,
all right,
Dr. Ogunwale, you are going to back just like you did this first one. So thank you, everybody. And least in closing, remember to go to tia.com.ng/free download to get your own free copy of Through It All. It's my birthday gift for you.